Jim Morrison's official cause of death says heart failure. No autopsy was ever performed. For 50 years, the story everyone tells is drugs. Heroin he supposedly didn't even use. A bathtub. A myth nobody can verify. But there's a detail buried in the accounts of the people who actually knew him. His own girlfriend, his closest friend, that nobody puts in the documentaries. Jim Morrison had a diagnosed medical condition. He was on a prescription drug that the U.S. government later pulled from the market because mixing it with alcohol could kill you. And he was mixing it with alcohol for years. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's in a book almost nobody's read. Let's get into it. Before we go further, where does this even come from? A man named Frank Lisciandro went to UCLA Film School at the same time as Morrison. He knew him for 6 years. He wasn't some tabloid guy chasing a story. He edited Morrison's own film project, Highway, an American Pastoral, and co-directed Feast of Friends, one of the only real behind-the-scenes documents of the Doors on tour. Decades later, Lisciandro sat down with the people closest to Morrison who almost never talk: his manager, his road manager, his closest friend, and his final girlfriend, a Hungarian artist named Eva Gardoni, and put their accounts in a book. That's where this fact comes from. Not a rumor site, direct testimony from people who were in the room. Here's the fact. Morrison suffered from asthma. For that, he was prescribed a drug called Marax, taken through an inhaler. Marax doesn't exist anymore. It was eventually banned in the United States because researchers determined that combining it with alcohol carried a real risk of death. Think about who we're talking about. This is a man whose entire public identity ran on alcohol. Whiskey on stage, whiskey in interviews. Whiskey was practically a prop in the Jim Morrison show. And the whole time he was walking around with a prescription that came with a chemical warning label against doing exactly that. Pamela Corson, his longtime partner, told Eva that Jim's asthma was tied to something deeper, possibly a rheumatic heart condition. Her words, relayed secondhand, were uncertain. Maybe, she said, but the connection between his lungs, his heart, and his medication was something people around him were actively worried about, years before Paris. Now here's why this actually matters, and it's not just trivia. The official myth of Jim Morrison's death is built entirely on excess. Drugs, a wild, self-destructive rock star who burned too hot and finally burned out at 27. That story is clean. It's mythic. It fits the poster. But if the people closest to him are right, there was a documented, physical, pre-existing time bomb running underneath all of it, years before Paris, that had nothing to do with how much of a legend he was trying to be. It means the drinking wasn't just recklessness for its own sake. It was recklessness on top of a body that medical science was already flagging as high risk. Every night on stage with a whiskey bottle wasn't just rock and roll excess. It was, according to the people who loved him, playing Russian roulette with a diagnosed condition. That's a very different story than he partied too hard and got unlucky. And once you know about the asthma and the heart, other stories from his life start reading differently. There's the story of Morrison's car, a Ford Mustang he called the Blue Lady. He liked to drive it the wrong way down alleys at full speed to terrify whoever was riding with him. His friend Babe Hill remembered one night the car got completely wrecked against a curb near the Beverly Hills police station. Hill said he was just holding on, sure they were about to die. Reckless, sure, but so is drinking heavily on a heart-flagged prescription. It's the same pattern. Then there's Amsterdam, 1968. The Doors were on tour, and before the show, Morrison took a lump of hash from Canned Heat Singer and swallowed it whole. He never made it on stage. He collapsed and was rushed to a hospital, run by nuns, which became a source of embarrassment once he came to and realized they knew exactly why he was there. He survived that one. But it's one more data point in the same column. A body already living with a documented cardiac and respiratory risk, taking hit after hit after hit for years until Paris finally collected. No autopsy was performed in Paris. The listed cause of death was heart failure. And for 50 years, that's been treated as a euphemism, code for drug overdose we can't officially confirm. But maybe it wasn't code for anything. Maybe it was just accurate. If Morrison really did have an underlying heart condition tangled up with asthma and a medication that was, by design, dangerous with alcohol, then heart failure isn't a cover story. It's the actual, documented, entirely plausible medical outcome of years of warning signs that nobody outside his inner circle ever heard about. The myth needs Jim Morrison to have died from being too much of a rock star. The people who actually sat with him, his girlfriend, his best friend, were describing something a lot more ordinary, and honestly, a lot sadder. A guy with a real diagnosis, ignoring real warnings for years until his body ran out of runway. None of this is in the official biographies you'll find with a quick search. It's buried in one book, built from interviews with people who spent years protecting Jim Morrison's privacy instead of cashing in on his death. That's the difference between the legend and the actual man. The legend gets the highlight reel. The real story is quieter, more medical, and honestly more human than the Lizard King burned out. If you want more of the Doors history that never makes it into the documentaries, that's exactly what this channel does. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.